And welcome to the Weekly Poll. As usual, I'm your host, Benny Potter, joined by my co-hosts, Joel from Caped Joel, Rob from Comics Explained, and Faust from It's Super Effective. I know it says Comic Pop on his name, but that's because Rob is too lazy to fix it.
You know what? Send me that stupid image.
Good thing that you're ducking, because every time I talk, you get quiet. Anyway.
That image right now.
Rob, you're trying to say something? Anyway, I'm Benny the Comic Historian. If you're just joining me from my channel, you know who I am. But if you're joining us from Twitch and you don't know who I am, I'm Benny the Comic Historian. And on that note, let's talk about Civil War spoilers. This is your last chance to leave the chat. If you don't want it, we plan on going ham talking about this movie. So
going deep, going raw on this movie.
4, 3, 2, 1. Spoil it, Rob. Go.
Are you sure?
Everyone dies.
Send me the image for that stupid freaking link. Yeah.
Man, when Rob gets something in his mind, he just gets it. Actually, funny, Faust, I'm glad you mentioned that there when you jokingly said everyone died. In fact, no one important died, but War Machine might be crippled now.
No, you know what? I guess we're just going to jump into that. Yes, I loved that one because I put a vote out on Twitter the other day, and I was like, do you guys want me to do the continuation of Iron Man or do the Death of Captain America storyline? And I had someone actually tweet me and go, did you just spoil the movie for me? And I'm like, wait, what? Like, really?
Someone's so vigilant about spoilers that even rhetorical questions.
Yeah. Like, no, okay, so I loved what they did with War Machine because, and I'll tell you right now, like, that was needed. And the reason why was because no one was caring about James Rhodes.
Well, the funny thing is, he's crippled and paralyzed, but they've already given him a way to walk, basically, and he's already said that
in the comic book world,
yeah, he's already able to walk again, and he's already basically said, if I'm needed, I'll be there. I will always do what I need to do, which in my mind made me go, War Machine's not out of the question. War Machine's just not the guy you'll call on until Infinity War now.
He won't be the first call.
Yeah. No, it also sets the stage for him to take over the role of Iron Man after Tony Stark leaves.
Yeah, it does.
Which is really cool.
Which did happen in the comics for a bit. Now, I know some people were like, man, can you believe we were all thinking they were going to kill a bunch of people and no one ended up dying, or no one of note ended up dying, to which I say, hey, you don't need death to ratchet up the stakes, and the stakes were already pretty damn high.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and reel it back to the beginning. Let's start at the top. How do you guys feel about the direction the Civil War took versus the Superhero Registration Act with the, I can't pronounce the thing, but the Accords for
The Sokovia Accords.
That's it.
Absolutely loved it. And here's the reason why. If they had just come out and because it made sense. The problem with Civil War, with adapting Civil War to a movie, is it can't hail to the comic because the comic had everybody except for mutants. The whole of the New Warriors and Nitro blowing up Stamford, Connecticut, that fit organically because Nitro had a history. He had fought Captain Marvel. He was clearly a dangerous character. With this, they tied it great into Age of Ultron, and that was a good thing to do. So the question that people had was, after Age of Ultron, what was the point of that movie? Like, that was a question. People were like,
now we know.
Now we have a point. Now the movie has a purpose in the Marvel.
It is interesting that in many ways this movie is the truer successor to the original Avengers, yet also it is a movie that could not exist if not for the events of Age of Ultron.
Yeah.
It almost felt like, to me, like Civil War was in a way written to make us forgive all of like the slightly more questionable movies in the Marvel franchise.
The more bloated aspects, they definitely reel some stuff back and kind of add a little bit more like, "Ooh, you didn't know about this."
See, I actually didn't think the Accords were as strong as the Superhero Registration Act. Going off what Rob said, the Superhero Registration Act had a lot of background, a lot of build-up, and I get that they couldn't do that with the movies, but I feel like it was kind of like, okay, this happened in Age of Ultron, so we're just going to move in that direction instantaneously. And like, Tony Stark, Vision, everyone was just like, yep, that makes sense, we're on board. While in the comics, there was a lot more build-up. It made more sense. It was more organic to what was happening in the world.
It affected more people, was the thing. The Superhuman Registration Act affected more people, and you could see like, oh, well, this will mess up the lives of street-level people like Daredevil and Spider-Man and everything. Because we don't have that, the movie had to kind of twist and change and be like, well, it's really more of an ideological thing for Cap and company who don't want to submit to governmental control.
Well, like, that was what was interesting to me, because it really just felt like, to me, it still feels like this. Tony kind of messed up a lot, and because of his own ego, he projected that onto everyone else.
He was being driven by shame was the thing, yeah.
And I agree with that, and I think the biggest problem is that in my opinion, we spent a lot of time setting up the actual fighting, why they would be against each other, and I feel like we spent a lot of time not really going over the exact reasons everyone was siding with the Accords, as opposed to being.
Ultimately, it is a Captain America movie, and I like that it was more focused on his opinions and his point of view. Otherwise, I would have preferred this to be another Avengers movie if it was going to go through that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Faust, because even though this is a Captain America movie, I think one of the strongest things Civil War does is goes out of its way to say, hey, just because it's Cap's movie doesn't automatically mean Cap's team is right. Both sides make very valid arguments, and at the end, they don't really resolve the issue of who's right and who's wrong. They kind of leave that up for the audience to decide, because these are big, heavy issues. You could easily sub in this superhero thing for nukes or drone warfare or anything if you wanted, and you'd be having the same argument.
Well, there was a really good article that was posted in The Inquisitor, and they were talking about the basis behind Civil War. And this, I think, was the shortcoming, that Civil War was basically made, somebody from Marvel, or somebody had done an interview where they said, we made Captain America Civil War because DC announced Batman versus Superman. We needed something equally big and huge from the Marvel Universe to match how big and huge Batman versus Superman was expected to be. And that, I think, was a downside. And here's the reason why. The reason why the Civil War comic was so good was because it affected a multitude of different people in different ways. There was a really good comic, a really good moment in a comic when Tigra, I think it was, some minor character, was talking to Sally Floyd, one of the members of the Daily Planet or Daily Bugle, who was investigating the whole thing alongside Ben Urich. And Tigra had said, I'm a college student. I've got finals and I'm trying to maintain a job and I've got bills to pay and all that kind of stuff. I'm a superhero in my spare time. There's no reason for me to be a superhero now anymore because I don't need the headache of registration. I don't need being told to go somewhere when I don't want to go there because I've got too much going on. And that was the beauty of Civil War, is that it forced people to quit being superheroes as opposed to continuing to fight the good fight. At the same time, one of the other great aspects of Civil War was the timeline. There was a deadline. The Superhuman Registration Act was passed by Congress, and then heroes had 24 hours to either register or be arrested. And in the movie, there was no timeline. It was just, well, suddenly it's been passed, and now everybody's a criminal. If they had, if somewhere along the line they had said, this has been passed, and if in that meeting with the Avengers...
Well, there was going to be a signing of the Accord, and that's where the big terrorist attack happens.
The problem is that because they didn't say you have this long to register, there was no sense of urgency. There was no, well, we've got to do something. We've got to figure out what we want to do.
Well, there was urgency later when Thunderbolt Ross gave Iron Man, you got 32 hours to bring in.
But it was late. We were already fighting at that point.
And this goes into various points that I wanted to make a bit later on, but it does feel like the Accords make sense for this movie, but for the context of the universe this movie is set in, it doesn't make sense when you look at the timeline, especially because the Accords was to bring the Avengers in check. But then if you look at the end of Jessica Jones, the whole world knows about Jessica Jones now. They know what she can do. Surely there should have at least been a short clip, even just 2 seconds, of a newscaster saying, everyone that's got superpowers, we know you're out there. You need to go to X place and sign the Accords.
By all right, they should know about the Inhumans too at this point, because that's a huge thing. More Inhumans are starting. Heck, in S.H.I.E.L.D., we saw them have a similar UN meeting being like, hey, what are we going to do about this Inhuman threat, guys?
They should have just, it should have
targeted towards the Avengers.
It should have just affected
whenever you try to talk
people.
and someone else is talking, it literally just keeps cutting you off and you can't say anything.
All right.
I'm just letting you know. With Faust trying to talk and you try to talk, it literally just chops you all up. And so for the first time ever, Faust will win every talk over. It does the same thing with Joel. So Joel needs to stop going, when you're talking, because it cuts out a whole chunk of your sentence. So, okay. Rob, you were going to say, and then we'll go to you, Faust.
Faust, go ahead, man.
Okay.
No, I was just saying, so there should have just been a clip with Jessica Jones or Daredevil. Even though he doesn't have superpowers, he is acting as a superhero. And I think if they'd at least done something so they were aware of what they were supposed to do, it would have just balanced things out a bit more and added a bit more weight to the situation.
Well, as we know, sadly, there's a bit of an intercompany dick measuring contest going on between all of those in powers. Yes, Rob.
I saw that in the chat too, Rob.
I saw that shit. That's happening. All right. So, oh yeah, no. So the whole okay. In terms of Jessica Jones, in terms of street level characters, and this is actually kind of an issue that I found with Sokovia Accords, is it only impacted the Avengers. It was
Yep.
only for the Avengers. It was regulating what the Avengers could and couldn't do, which I thought was kind of a cool thing in the context of it. But for me, Civil War would have been much better as like a whole phase. Like if all of Phase 4 was Civil War. Have all the
Your original theories were perfect. Like if that had happened, because remember we had this argument that you were like, it's going to carry over in the rest of the movies, and I was like, no, it's going to be self-contained. If your theory had panned out and it was Phase 4, that would have been perfect.
But then the way the movie ended, it could still pan out to other movies because
we're going to be dealing with the fallout for a bit.
So there's nothing to say the Accords were dissolved, so it could still pan out. That theory could still come to pass.
So that's so right now with the way Civil War, we'll get to that. We'll get to that here later on. But no, in terms of the Sokovia Accords, creating a sense of urgency for the Avengers, saying like, here's why the Avengers are fighting. Yes, that makes sense. In terms of it panning out to the whole, in comparison to the Superhuman Registration Act and all that kind of stuff, it Civil War grossly falls short. But again, you're talking about with the and I even addressed this in my video on Civil War. You're talking about a comic book event that spanned a year, was composed of 110 issues, and encompassed everything from the top tier Marvel characters all the way down to like Heroes for Hire, like the super small guys and the ones that nobody really cared about. It involved everybody. You can't take something that huge and condense it down into a 2.5, 3 hour movie and do it adequately. So for what the Russos did and for the quality that it was great. How they managed to modify it strictly to involve the Avengers, but in terms of the Superhuman Registration Act, I think the one thing lacking was that, one, there was no sense of urgency. Two, there was no one to enforce it. What was S.H.I.E.L.D. going to do? S.H.I.E.L.D.'s gone. They've been ended. As far as the world knows, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that show is secret. The events in that are secret. No one knows that Coulson's alive. No one knows that S.H.I.E.L.D. still exists. They're just, hidden from the world, except for, like the president and a couple of political officials. So who was going to enforce it? Like, who was going to make, like, if you said no, who was going to make them? Like, what was going to happen? And so those are the kind of things that I think were lacking. Those are the kind of things that I think, kind of held back, making it dire circumstances. But that said, I still loved it.
I honestly didn't think of any of that until you mentioned it just now, Rob. More credit where credit is due that I'll give, because we're comparing it to the comic right now. 3 big things they actually work in from the comics that I did not expect them to, and I think they retrofitted them for the movie in an interesting way. The explosion, which again was still carried out by arguably the youngest and most chaotic of the Avengers team. The mother guilting Tony Stark and his shame being a big motivator for the rest of the movie. And lastly, Cap's speech about not moving, now given to the deceased Peggy Carter to him, like, okay, I like it better that dead Peggy Carter said that speech.
Oh my God, that scene was everything. I like Peggy talking to Cap from beyond the grave. Oh my God, it was...
Yes,
okay,
that was...
Time, Rob.
Okay. This is why I love the Russos. This is why it's the small stuff that the Russos do that I think is so awesome. One, I'm so glad that like Sharon Carter was not just there. Like they didn't say, "Hey guys, here's a chick that like Steve Rogers will be banging at some point." Like I'm glad that they were like she had a purpose. She was literally like the inside man, and that's when you mentioned that, now that I think about it, that was cool because if you remember in Civil War, they both had inside people on each side. Like you had Captain America who had Tigra, I think it was, who was an inside person on Cap's team, or on Cap, and then you had Tony Stark or whatever it was. Tony Stark had Hulkling and something along those lines. Anyway, the point
it was the shapeshifter on Iron Man's team. I just remember who it was.
Yeah. Captain America had Hulkling, and then Iron Man had Tigra, and they were providing information from both sides. That I thought was cool. Agent 13, like I'm really excited to see what happens with her character later on down the road. Like, and I really want to know if she's the one that shoots, because Steve Rogers is going to be the bearer of bad news, but he will die at some point. The death of Captain America's story arc will take place, and I'm really hoping the Russos make it, and I'm really hoping she's the one that shoots him.
For those of you guys who are wondering, because this is a common misconception on the Civil War comic book, a lot of people are like, oh, didn't Captain America die in the comic book? He actually didn't at all. The comic book series and the Civil War itself ends with the arrest of Captain America. Then in the Captain America comic book, which is literally titled Civil War Epilogue, the following issue, when he's being carried to the court steps, that's when he gets shot. It doesn't actually take place in the Civil War. That's why the whole debate of, oh, is he going to die? Is he not going to die? Does he die in the comics? Was a huge thing because it's literally its own story arc. And I just read through it. It takes place over its own 16 to 17 issues. Just his death, not even the return. That's just the death and them trying to figure it all out. So it's its own thing. It has nothing to do with Civil War, except that Civil War is the reason he was arrested. That was it.
Supposedly shot by Crossbones, who shows up in this movie, again played by Frank Grillo in great fashion. I'm like, man, dude, I love this guy so much. Then exploded. I'm like, man.
Okay, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that because everyone's asking about that. How do you guys feel about their portrayal of Crossbones? Because he was super hyped up as being in this movie, and I was super excited to finally get like one of the cool Captain America villains as like a reoccurring theme, and boom,
dead.
Disappointed. Like, I get that they had to make way for Baron Zemo, which we'll talk about that in a minute. God, Russo's, I love you. But with Crossbones, I was disappointed because I love the character of Crossbones, but more so than that, I loved like the character of I love Frank Grillo as an actor. Like he won over in Warrior. Like he won me over in that movie. Like after that, I was like, Frank Grillo, you're my home slice. I love your acting chops. Great guy. Brock Rumlow is not just a one-off villain for Captain America. He's been around for a long time.
He's involved in a lot of events. Like every event, I think he at least gets a cameo or he shows up.
And he fights other heroes too. Yeah. Like he's had some stuff with the Punisher. He dates Red Skull's daughter, which I was all hyped about. I'm like, you get Crossbones in here now. That in the next movie you'll work in Sin and be like, I am the daughter of Johann Schmidt and I have come to destroy you, Captain America.
There was a lot they could do with this character later on down the road, but true to form, with what I think is the bane of Marvel's existence when it comes to villains, they killed him off, and it's so disappointing to me because what are they can't bring him back. He was already crushed by a building, hence the reason he became Crossbones. Is he going to survive the explosion and come back?
It's even worse because they have the Raft prison now. Where I'm like, good, you have the prison. Put all your villains in there now.
Yes, they could have put him in there at the end, or in the movie. They could have just like stuck him in the raft and been like, "You're here," and you could have seen him when everybody else was stuck in the raft. You could have just seen him there, but I don't, and it's probably because they have too much going on and things like that, like the death of, like, looking back, the death of Obadiah Stane, the death of Brock Rumlow, although Justin Hammer did survive, the death of a lot of those characters leads me to believe that, like, all this is going to be rebooted after Infinity War. But, I think that, it's disappointing that they chose not to keep him going. Having said that, I dug him. Like, I dug the scene between him and Captain America, because it was just a guy with some inherent who just hated Steve Rogers and was just beating him. Just beating him.
And his weapons, dude, I loved his weapons. Where he's like,
did you notice too that his like mech suit, that his exo armor suit there is a Hydra soldier outfit from World War II that they have retrofitted and painted up in cross and everything.
I didn't notice that.
That's what it is. That's totally what it is. I'm like, yep, he's a neo-Hydraist. Of course he would dress up in the uniform. Oh, my favorite bit, too, he wears a gas mask over his supervillain mask at a point. I'm like, that is comics. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, where it doesn't make, like, it wouldn't make more sense to rotate your mask. Or no, let's just put it on top of my mask, and we'll just call it good.
He's double masking it, man. It's maskception.
I didn't even think about that. When I saw him. I was like, that is a good point, man. He was wearing...
All right, so Crossbones, I mean, Faust, did you have any words on Crossbones? I mean, you didn't...
It was good.
All right, moving on to the next appearance in the movie. Let's just trying to think of the order in which it came out, so we're not just like, let's talk about the end, let's talk about over here, let's talk about the middle.
I think
Thunderbolt Ross came back. That was a big thing, and surprisingly was not a villain. I kept expecting him to be like a red herring, like the twist was going to be, oh, Ross was behind it all along or something.
What was that, Rob?
Oh, with General Thunderbolt Ross, they teased the Red Hulk, which I'm excited about.
Yeah.
And like the whole perception, and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how I feel about Red Hulk being in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think it'd be cool. Obviously, William Hurt's a little too like by the time you're talking about 5-6 years from now, maybe 7 or even closer to 10, when you would actually see a Red Hulk, if we saw that happen. I think Thunderbolt. I think William Hurt might be a little too old to play the role of Thunderbolt Ross, especially given the kind of things that he does and the role that he plays in the comics. But at the very least, I think it'd be kind of cool. But I actually want to talk for a second about the fact that he didn't seem to care or hate Bruce Banner. Like, do you know where Banner is? And I was expecting a little more. Like, do you know where that asshole Bruce Banner is? Or something like that.
You expect him to be more of a dick, like, that Banner guy, he done did my daughter, Liv Tyler. I hate you Avengers because of it.
I honestly feel like that was a missed opportunity to at least hype up Ragnarok, because they're like, do you even know where Banner and Thor is? And they're just like, no. Okay.
I think because realistically, they don't know is the thing.
Yeah, that is true.
Does it? I mean, couldn't they have just said, why does it matter? Like, at least sort of bring some kind of tension to that scene. Like, why do you want to know?
Because like, what Nuke Asgard, that's why.
Yeah, they just kind of like brushed it off. Like, you're right, we don't know. Next topic. You're like, okay.
Vision wears a sweater. How great is that? Vision wears a sweater.
No, because that's perfect, because it ties into the current Vision comic where he like wants normality, and that's his vision of that's his idea of normality, and it's perfect. Vision and people are complaining like it was a cheap way to humanize him. No, it's perfect because that's what he thinks humanity does.
Yeah, that's the best part about Vision. Vision doesn't understand humanity. That's the best part about him. So whenever you see a comic and he tries to be normal, he has his own idea of what normal is, and that's like a sweater or trying to make food. What was it? Whatever he made for Scarlet Witch, the meal he was making. Because
I think that was borscht he was trying to make.
Yeah, he's like, I'm making a meal. Keep in mind, I can't taste anything, so I have no idea if I did this right or wrong.
Yeah, he was trying to make paper cash. Okay, can we talk about like Vision and Scarlet Witch for a second?
Yes,
they totally
we can.
hinted at it. They totally hinted at it.
Which means I could play Wiccan. But like going into it, no, I love. I just broke my phone. I love how they're doing it. I like that's like one of my all-time favorite comic book romances, which is weird to say, but I love like the moment where I saw in Age of Ultron, saw Scarlet Witch in Vision's arms after he just saved him. I was like, it's gonna happen. Then for them to explore it, the amount that they explored it in this movie, like. I need an adult because I just flooded my basement. Like,
wow, that's graphic. Wow, that's filthier than anything I've said on this show.
Is it?
No, I thought it was such a cool because I've been waiting for the two of them to get together, and like I'm waiting for like the next movie when they're like, yeah, like we're kind of getting it on. Like I'm waiting for something like that to happen, But no, I one of the things that I love most about what the Russos explored with Vision in this is like he's trying to be like what Vinny said, like he's trying to be human, like trying to become human, and even like the evolution of him. Later on when he said that he got distracted, and Stark was like, I didn't think that could happen. He's like, well, neither could I. Well, obviously that ties into the Mind Stone and how it grows or evolves or becomes a part of whatever it's attached to. But I think it also talks about Vision and how he's kind of, becoming more and more human, which I could see them playing on that and explaining how it is that he and Scarlet Witch get together. Because over the course of this movie, like he has some hankering for like human connection or some longing or maybe just like an interest in her, even if it's only, surface, even if he's only like, I'm just curious what it's like to get with a chick, whatever what may be. But like I like them exploring the whole romance between the two of them, and the great thing about this is it didn't feel forced. Like Tony Stark was like, Vision, stay there, make sure Wanda doesn't show up because she already looks bad because she blew up some building and killed the king, or didn't kill the king of Wakanda, killed Wakandans, and so like she already looks bad in the public eye. We need to keep her hidden because if people see her, they're going to be mad. And so Vision, it was kind of like this scenario where he was playing babysitter, but also exploring his feelings towards her, and she was reciprocating them. And so I think that given their stories, her whole past and losing Quicksilver and that kind of stuff, I think it blends well to bring the two of them together. But yeah,
it very easily could have been a throwaway scene, and yet they do such a good job making it meaningful and having impact, and they do that with everything. Like, this is a huge movie with a ton of people in it, and yet no one feels buried, no one feels underused or underutilized. Everyone had a goal that they wanted to accomplish, and they did it, and then for the finale, they happily step aside and let Cap have the finale of his own movie.
And can we just talk about how they did Scarlet Witch properly in this movie? In Age of Ultron, she just kind of turned into Jean Grey, which pissed me off quite a bit. And in this one, she was Scarlet Witch. Like,
yeah, the hex magic, the manipulative magic, be able to move things. And then I loved. Okay, let me just ask this question: how many floors are in that Avengers base? Because she buried him through like 50.
As many as you need. That's why.
oh, but like when she did that, like I was just like, it's Wanda. I'm happy. I'm so happy because she's like been my favorite Avenger since like from a very, very long time. And I don't know, like I was happy that they did her right because it felt like a lot of care was put into her character, and like it is very easy just to go, her powers are weird, she can be a psychic. And they like clearly for this movie they went, no, let's actually do this properly because she's a unique character and she deserves that.
It shows a growth and evolution of her too, like she's learned her powers since the last time we saw her, and yet also is not fully in control of them, and because of that is actually quite dangerous.
I just want to put this out there. Royal Static is apparently counted. There are 25 floors and 10 sub-levels.
Good job.
I don't know if he actually counted, but that seems legit with how many floors Vision went through.
If that's true, buy that man a Coke.
Yeah. But,
So, okay, let's move on to the next big character that popped up, okay? How did you guys feel about Black Panther? Like, come on.
Owned it, man.
His costume was so good.
It was so amazing.
It fitted him perfect. Like, what fabric did they use, and where can I buy it? Because I should do that for my Ninjak remake. Like,
I lost my shit over the retractable claws, and you know that was such a moment where they're like, Wolverine who?
yeah. God, dude, man, dude, Black Panther, Chadwick Boseman, man. Like, man,
what I loved about the Black Panther thing, I'm just going to jump in with this real quick, is the fact that we got just enough about him. He was explained that you did not have a single black... I am not a giant Black Panther fan. The comic books don't normally do it for me with him as a solo thing, because the only ones that I've really read, he went on a crazy, like, otherworldly adventures with the Fantastic Four, or he was dealing with a marriage with Storm. Like, it never really worked for me. So I didn't know too much about Black Panther, other than was general knowledge, and they gave you just enough. He's got a father. The warrior is the one who takes the title. He's the king who is a warrior. The suit works based upon the ring, I'm assuming, at this point. It's a little different, but whatever. Like, the ring seems to be where it was coming out of. That works. And there was enough of him and what Wakanda was that you had no questions. And I'm totally ready for a Black Panther movie now. Like, don't origin it, just move forward.
It's super interesting that, like, in the first, like, in his whole 10 minutes of screen time he has in the movie, they basically give you the first act of what a Black Panther movie would be.
Yeah.
And they get it out of the way in this one. And once again, doesn't feel bloated, doesn't feel like a diversion. It's very, very, organic to what's going on because, they play the Winter Soldier into the death of his father, so it's a revenge quest for him.
Yeah, it was so great because they didn't throw him in your face. Like, I felt like Chadwick Boseman, like Black Panther, was the standout star of the movie because, like, his entire purpose, is like this. His dad was the ambassador. He's the king of Wakanda. He was there with his dad on a mission for the Sokovia Accords. Like, the building gets blown up. His dad dies, and he's like, Bucky Barnes did this because news footage shows his face there. I'm gonna get Bucky Barnes, and he was in the background almost the entire time. Like, he was either following Tony Stark or he was just watching things unfold. And that's what I liked about it, because the Russos constantly told you, even if he was just sitting in a chair and watching, Captain America and whoever else it was, Tony or whoever he was with, watching them like race off, to the sub-level, or with Sam Wilson to race off to the sub-level, or, the explosion and everything. And Black Panther's just sitting there on his phone, and then he looks over and watches them run. You're like, well, he's obviously going to do something. His fight with, or both of his fights, really, with the Winter Soldier, like, it was, I'm with Benny on this. It was just enough to tell you this dude's clearly a badass, and he can do some cool stuff. But it was just like, wouldn't you like to see more? And I'm just like, yes.
And he also arguably brings in the bad guy at the end. He ultimately is the one who saves the day by choking out.
And how about that line, though, when Zemo, and we'll talk about Zemo in a minute, but how about that line where, like, Zemo's like, I'm done. And he's like, the living aren't done with you yet. You're like,
Yeah, he was full of great lines, because there was the bit where Black Widow's like, don't worry, we'll bring your father's killer to justice. And he's like, no, I will kill him myself.
Faust, you had something you wanted to add to this.
I did. And I remember what it was now. It's so easy to turn Black Panther into what society thinks Batman is. Not what Batman is, but what people think Batman is. And he's not that. He's Black Panther, and he's got his own identity, and I'm so happy about that because, you know, sort of turning him into a cheap fat man would have been easy, but he's not that, and I'm happy about that.
Well, it presented like so many questions that they could answer in the movies. Like Vinny's question, well, where does his power come from, the ring? Or is the ring just a symbol of the new king? Did T'Challa sit down and say, well, my father's dead, I am now the king of Wakanda, and the ring is used to symbolize who the king is? Does his power actually come from the god Bast? Or is it one of those things where it's like, well, because we're trying to make the movies more realistic, Bast is really more of a symbol, and they just like absorb some radiation from the heart-shaped herb, get abilities, or it enhances them, done and done. The suit, well, how does vibranium work? Does he have a vibranium suit? Because vibranium comes from Wakanda. Like, how are the bullets bouncing off? Or are they just fall? Like, how does all that stuff work? And it answers, even the post-credit scene where it shows Wakanda, like, I want to see what Wakanda looks like now, like, in that country. And so it's like, it gives you so many questions, and it leaves you so excited for the Black Panther movie because you're going to get a lot of those answered. Mm-hmm. I think the Russos basically, did a great job of taking the character of T'Challa and turning his involvement in the film into a 2.5 hour long teaser for the Black Panther movie that's going to be coming, because that's what it felt like. It felt like a teaser for.
You also have to give massive props to Boseman. They give him a coming to America accent, and yet it doesn't seem silly. He seems very regal when he's out of the costume, and when he's in the costume, boom, all business, all ferocity. None of the other Avengers, they build this feeling where it's like none of the other Avengers could take him one-on-one, hand-to-hand, that he could take them all apart, powers or not.
Yeah. Okay. How many of the guys in the chat are hyped for a Black Panther movie now? After seeing Black Panther in the Marvel in Civil War, how many of you guys are hyped for a movie? Like, I'm so excited for Black Panther now.
All right, well, let's move on to the next character. We're not just sitting for the next hour talking about how awesome Black Panther is now. And I'm agreeing. I 100% agree. Black Panther is amazing. And I literally, as soon as I got out of that movie, started researching, like, what are the good Black Panther stories? And that's a story in itself as to why I had to find weird ones where he does a bunch of weird stuff. But whatever. Yeah, they're all hype. Look at you did. Hype!
Black Panther hype!
All right, so let's go over this next question, because I've seen it come up a few times. And our newest subscriber, Miles Uncharted, actually asked this question. He just subscribed, so thank you so much for that. How'd you guys feel about Zemo? Because I'm not even going to lie. When they first gave Zemo's name, it didn't even click with me that it was Baron Zemo, supposed to be this version.
Helmut Zemo.
Yeah, I heard Zemo, and I'm like, is that Baron Zemo? Because, like, where's the mask? And
You know what it is? This is, and I totally thought of this, this is the Mandarin all over again, where here's a character who makes perfect sense in the movie, is three-dimensional, makes perfect sense, but doesn't have the costume, and they've tweaked moments of the origin, but it works better here than it did in that other movie.
Ah, dude, Helmut Zemo in this movie is better than he's ever been in the comics, and here's why. And I'm glad the Russos did this. The Russos did not tell you why he was doing what he was doing until the end. They didn't give you his motivation, because if right off the bat they had said, well, my family died because of Sokovia, it would have taken away from everything. Yeah. It would have taken, because then he would have just been your stereotypical angry villain. But by giving you like everything he did, by going through all the lengths and all the plans that he set up, and then at the end saying, I did all of this because my wife and my father and my child died in Sokovia, it makes him a tragic villain. It makes him a guy that you're just like, he's literally just a grieving father. He's no different than Frank Castle. He's a guy who lost his family, and he's mad, and he's going to take it on. But not only that, it makes him super smart, because in the comics he's really, really smart. Mm-hmm. And by focusing on that intelligence and basically evolving, you have the Sokovia Accords whenever they play background, but by taking his character and having him go through all these lengths and all this planning and all this subterfuge for the sole purpose of splitting up the Avengers team, and I'm glad they didn't kill him off. It makes him, in my mind, one of the best potential future villains. And even now, like, I look at him and I say, what if he were to form the Thunderbolts? Like,
I'm glad that I was totally going there, because think about it. You got Thunderbolt Ross now, and you even mentioned at the top, how's the government going to enforce these rules? Well, we have a super smart military man in our prison. How about we give him a purple mask and say, assemble a team of villains? We got the Abomination. You can have him. You can have Batroc the Leaper. Just go nuts.
Yeah, I mean, especially because, like, they didn't need to go all out with the costume and everything the first time he appeared, especially because they've kept him alive. He can break out of prison. Like, there is like 1,000,001 different ways that they can reintroduce him in the costume, doing weird, crazy shit later down the line. Maybe him being in prison is what drives him over the edge and makes him get in a costume. Like,
hopefully they do it like they did in the cartoon, where like the mask gets melted to his face.
I like that. But making him not of Hydra too was actually a smart choice, because if he was the Baron Zemo we know from the comics with the mask and the sword and Captain America, he would basically just be Red Skull Volume 2. And I mean, everyone would complain he was just the Red Skull all over again.
Yeah, it was. It got to, and you know, to kind of touch on that, because imagine that you have Thunderbolt Ross who shows up, and he goes to see, you know, Baron Zemo, and is like, I saw everything you did. Like here's the honest truth. There's nothing we could have done to stop the Avengers if they chose not to register. And so he was like, we need someone to form a team that can keep the Avengers in check if we need them to. And then Baron Zemo was like, okay, yeah, I'll run this team for you. But in the background, he was like, I'm just going to wage war against the Avengers. And it immediately goes rogue with the Thunderbolts, you know, and then just starts. And then you've got an an antithesis to the Avengers. You've got the Avengers and you got an anti-Avengers team. And that's a great way, I think, to introduce a new villain, or at least an ongoing villain for the Avengers and, you know, in future phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But focusing on Baron Zemo as a character, focusing on just him as a person, I thought he was so well written and he was so well designed. And that was my biggest fear, is in the movie they were going to kill him off at the end. When he had that gun in his hands, I thought that you know, when T'Challa realized, you know, well, he was the reason why my father died, that he was just going to let him kill himself. But when T'Challa intervened and took that gun away, I was like, thank you so much.
Because he said no to revenge. He saw himself reflected in Zemo's mad quest for vengeance and said, no, I will not be like you. I will show mercy because I'm a hero and that's what heroes do.
Yeah. I like that. I going back to the Black Panther, I loved that twist where he saw what Zemo was doing, and it turned Black Panther from being a guy just obsessed with the vengeance and being like, no, I need to be better than this. I am a hero. And that sets. I would love it if the Black Panther movie just jumped right from that scene, like literally him dropping him off and they just go to Wakanda.
That would be cool.
Cool. Which, speaking of Wakanda for a second, one of the things that I'm really glad about in the post-credit scene is they showed how advanced Wakanda is in terms of like the environment, the technologies and stuff, and putting Bucky Barnes in stasis. Like, I'm so glad they showed that, because now it's just like, this place is super advanced. They've got cryostasis that doesn't look like it existed in the 1940s. Like, it's updated and it's cool looking stuff. But I just kind of wanted to mention that. Like,
I'm glad you mentioned Bucky too, because for the second Captain America movie in a row now, he is like one of the main focuses. They go all Manchurian Candidate with him in some interesting ways, and they kind of make him the last tether Steve has to his past in his old life, and that's why Steve moves heaven and earth to try and save him, even in situations when maybe he shouldn't, is the thing. And I think that's really cool to show Captain America as a person.
Isn't it like, it's an interesting theme that is very strongly explored in the movie without being too in your face, about how like everyone does eventually lose what tied them to their past. Like in the same movie where he loses Peggy, which was his romance from his past, he loses Bucky, but then also forms a romantic relationship with Peggy's niece.
That's actually something, and I get Captain America's motivation for, like, maybe before we go to Spider-Man, which everyone wants to know, Spider-Man and the Aunt May situation. Let me ask you guys this. So the core of the reason why they started the fight was because Bucky was being blamed for the explosion. And Captain America decided to go stop it because he assumed they would shoot first and then ask questions later. Why did he not at any point be like, I think Bucky's innocent. How about I help you guys capture Bucky? We'll try to take him in alive. That's how we're going to do it. Why did he jump to, I need to go rogue? Fuck it.
I think he was kind of protecting himself. I think in his heart of hearts, even he didn't really trust Bucky, but he was going to protect him regardless.
Well, I also think there was, when he first met Bucky, Bucky was ready to give himself up. He was like ready to die. Yeah. And so like if you went charging in to Bucky with the entire Avengers and went, so are you innocent? You know, he would have just been like, well, fuck. Do you trust me? No, you don't trust me. Like, fuck it. Yeah, I'm guilty. Whatever.
I mean, it was good. I liked it. I was just trying to see what your guys' thoughts and the motivations behind it were, you know? I mean, we all have our own ideas what happened there and everything, because I feel like a few things were sort of forced into the fight when it very easily could have been like, how about we talk for 5 seconds?
That's kind of every
5 seconds
superhero
is all we
battle
need.
ever,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well,
who talks?
I think it went into Steve Rogers because remember, he was talking, like when he was talking to them about the whole registration thing, he was like, well, we can't do this because, whatever, the UN's ran by people have agendas. And I think he knew that given the history of Bucky Barnes, that they would just shoot him on sight. It'd be easier to kill him off because he's like the most elusive assassin in the history of the world. And given all the things that he had done, I think they would have just, would have said it would just be easier to kill him on sight as opposed to try to capture him and bring him in. Yeah. But, and touching on the whole thing, like this is why I love the Russos so much, man. The whole dichotomy, the whole relationship between Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes was so good because it's when I talked about this, I had said that like Bucky Barnes and Peggy Carter were truly the only two things that kept Steve Rogers linked to his past. And I think that the problem with Steve Rogers in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not in terms of like his acting chops or the movies that he's in, but in terms of like his character and being in the 21st century, is he can't adapt to it. And so like, he's like, yes, people have problems, whatever, but he's still trying to get used to it. But he's like, but I really want to go back to the way things used to be. And Bucky Barnes gives him that. Like, it gives him that outlet of going back to the way things used to be, or at least feeling the way that he used to feel before, he was frozen in ice for 40 years or however long, 20 years. And so I think that this whole idea of, him going out and seeking Bucky Barnes is, one, because he's a friend and the whole story of redemption, but two, because Bucky gives him a way to live vicariously through the past. Now, having said that, I loved what they did with Bucky Barnes. Like it turned out that he was being tricked the whole time, but you didn't know that up until, of course, the whole thing with Baron Zemo and towards the end of the movie. But the idea that Bucky was the centerpiece of this, I thought was done extremely well. And this is why I thought the movie was made so well, because everybody had a role to play. Like you guys had said earlier, everybody had a role to play, and everybody played that role respectively. Bucky Barnes was the misunderstood villain. He was the guy that had been tricked into a circumstance, or people had believed he was guilty of a circumstance. But I thought it also showed him great in his element, what he's capable of, the kind of things that he can do, his level of intelligence, his I guess his experience in subterfuge and being an assassin and all that kind of stuff. But the issue of, in the end, there are people out there that are still far more capable than he is, namely Black Panther. And I thought that his portrayal overall, especially, with Sebastian Stan and how everything went down, was... Faust, are you going to be okay?
I just realized something.
He's going slow.
Rob, you can get back to this in a second, because if I don't say this, I'm going to explode. So I just realized another way they set up this feud between, and it's so fucking subtle, between Captain America and Iron Man, is at the start of the movie, Tony Stark is doing that presentation about how he creates like a holographic image of his past so he can live vicariously through his past. And he says that he doesn't care about it. And then Steve's whole point in this movie is that he wants to hold on to his past. Whereas Tony's like, I don't care about my past. And
oh, man. Dude, you hit it right there, man. I think you got also the big reveal with Winter Soldier, which obviously it's not really a big reveal. It's not a twist. If you were paying attention to Winter Soldier, they came out and said it. Yeah, Bucky killed Tony's parents, and here they make that the centerpiece of it. I called it right away when I saw him back in '91. I'm like, oh, this is where he kills his parents. But then they trick you with the whole thing with the fake army of Winter Soldiers, where it's like, yeah, they're an unstoppable death squad that can bring down countries in a day, only for that to be a bait and switch and be like, haha, it was actually about this though.
See, that's what I was gonna say, is like taking the Winter Soldier and saying like he assassinated Stark's parents was a great way to like create that to keep that tension going, because once it came to it, it was like, well, Bucky didn't do it, it was Baron Zemo. It's like, well, then what do we do with Bucky now? Well, he killed Stark's parents, man.
All right, guys.
And what a great line read from Robert Downey Jr. in that moment, where it's like, he killed my mom, man. That's like, there's no coming back. We're having this fight right now. Yeah. I'm sorry, there's no getting out of it.
All right, so we've run out of time, guys, so we're not going to talk about your favorite topic. We'll see you all next. No, I'm kidding.
you had me going for a second, like, but I got so much to say about Spider-Man, though.
All right. Let's talk about Spider-Man and young Aunt May. I'm going to start this one off by stating, personally, because a lot of people are like, oh, I want old Aunt May. I think what this is young Peter Parker and young Aunt May is Marvel learning from a pseudo mistake that they've got going on right now, in which people like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and everyone are getting too old for their roles. So if we go really young with the Spider-Man cast, we got him for like 15 years.
Well, especially like with they're not just learning from their own mistakes, they're learning from Game of Thrones mistakes.
Yeah.
Because like Bran is supposed to be 13 at the moment in Game of Thrones.
He's like 18, 19, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's going to start bringing kids to the set and everything. So, I got to pay my taxes. I got a bad back.
Well, the only issue with that is like Marissa Tomei is like 51, but I will say,
but Aunt May in the comics, at least other than the Ultimate Universe, is like 60, 70. She's old.
Geriatric.
She is old. Like
you're talking about like relative to their age in the comics. Yeah.
She's old enough to be able to reminisce with Captain America when she meets him. Oh, you remember the 30s? I remember the 30s.
Remember that time when you saved us in World War II?
Do I ever?
Okay, so I think we can all agree that Marissa Tomei was pretty damn hot. Like
she's 51, but she's a hard 51, man.
I mean, I can agree that they did her makeup really well. I mean that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she looked at like I saw the movie twice, and I was like, nope, I wasn't enamored when I first saw it. Like she is that hot. Like Marissa Tomei, you aged very well.
And they call it out too with Tony Stark basically saying, "Man, your aunt is pretty hot, man. Is she single?"
Yeah. Oh no, he says, "Oh, you seem really young to be an aunt." And then like that was my favorite line from the movie. It's like at least they acknowledged it.
What great lampshade hanging, and they really needed to hang that lampshade on this thing in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Can we just go ahead with Spider-Man?
Yeah, let's go in it. First off, loved the suit, loved the joke. One thing that I loved about the Spider-Man appearance, before you go on to talk about the costumes for the next 5 hours, Faust, is I loved the fact that we didn't even go into his origin. We didn't even explain how Iron Man knew about it.
Over it.
They were just like, he's like, I got a guy, and he shows up, and like they didn't even be like, they could have taken 2 seconds to be like, I found you because I was doing research. But you know what? He's Tony Stark. It probably was anyway, and they're just like, I found you. You're easy to find.
Okay,
it's a nice relationship they draw between. It's like, hey, you're a young scientist, I'm an older scientist and everything. I'm feeling really ashamed about everything, but I bet if I help you out, I can make myself feel better.
Well, I have to say, I loved that this Peter Parker one is young. I've been saying like every actor that has played Peter Parker up to this point is just slightly too old because I just want an awkward looking Peter Parker. I want him to look like Michael Cera's Spawn.
And also a Spider-Man from Queens with an actual New York accent. Why did it take us like 5 of these to finally get a Spider-Man who talks like he's from New York?
And isn't it amazing how Marvel has had Spider-Man for 2 seconds and they made him good? It's not difficult. We've all been saying this whole time. It's not difficult to make Spider-Man good.
I love that they stress that he's poor and he has to dumpster dive for computer parts. I'm like, yes, that's...
I did everything about him. Even when he shows up in the fight, he shows up and he's like, Cap, big fan, like making the jokes, even though he's supposed to be fighting against Cap, getting into the fight with Falcon and Winter Soldier, and they're like, I don't know if you've been in fights, but there's not this much talking. And he's like, oh, sorry.
And he's like, he seems to be this merge of Kamala Khan and Spider-Man, but like that works for the movie because he's such a huge fanboy. And like you could imagine him sitting up at night writing Captain America fan fiction.
Oh God, yes.
Okay, Rob, go.
Slash comics.
Something that I also really dug here was Marvel was like, he just now got his powers. Like he's had his powers for like 6 months, and that I think was so cool because, like, my question was, if they're going to introduce Spider-Man, like, how far along is he? Like, because my question was, well, why wasn't Peter Parker present in the Battle of New York? Like, why wasn't he there? Like, how are they going to explain that? It's like, well, he just got his powers like 6 months ago, so he was a normal human during the Battle of New York, and he was just somebody watching it all unfold. That I think is really cool because it gives him a fresh way to start off. It gives him a fresh way to say, like, he's learning to become, Spider-Man. He's learning the things that go along with it. But touching on your all's whole thing about being a huge fan, I loved the whole thing with Winter Soldier. He was like, dude, you have a metal arm? That's
not for me, it's not. The Russians cut this off.
Like, everything about him was, like, perfect Spider-Man. And it even turned Natalie, my wife, who wasn't really a fan of the Spider-Man movies that much, into a Spider-Man fan. She was like, he was awesome in his role. And everything about him. And even cracking the jokes as he took down Giant Man. I mean...
we can call him Giant Man. Talking about, it's like, hey, remember that old movie Empire Strikes Back? Oh my God, Tony, how young is this kid? I don't know, I didn't carbon date him.
Just all those jokes. And for the record, I loved War Machines. Tiny guy got big. He got real big.
Dude,
and
the
then
kids
Scott
in my
Lang just
theater,
being like, oh.
the little kids in my theater lost it for Ant-Man. Young children love Ant-Man, which makes sense because he's tiny and they're tiny and he's a hero, so they think they can be a hero too. It makes a lot of sense.
Well, I loved how Ant-Man and Spider-Man were both kind of like the same thing where they were just fanboys. Because, like, I'm still shaking your hand, aren't I?
Oh, the whole, here's your shield, Captain America.
I love the scene when Hawkeye was like, he's like, you ready? He's like, yeah, let's do this, arrow guy. And he shoots the arrow at him. Like, I was like, oh my god, like freaking. I really felt like Scott Lang, like Paul Rudd. It's as cool as it was to see Spider-Man. I felt like Paul Rudd made that airport scene something special.
Oh no, he definitely did.
The best part for Paul Rudd for me was after the airport scene when he's locked up. And he goes, Hank Pym told me not to trust a star. And Tony's just like, who are you?
And he's like, come on, man.
or how about the fact where Captain America's like, we're fugitives on this one. Like, ugh, what else is new?
So, but going back to Spider-Man, I do have one thing. And this is ignoring in company turmoil. Everyone knows who Jessica Jones is at this point. Would it not have been easier for Tony to get a hold of Jessica Jones than it would be to do research into finding a kid that has superpowers, then risking a child's life in this situation?
But they weren't scientists like him is the thing. He had to go with his science bros.
Right.
Also, Jessica Jones might say no. Jessica Jones would be like, no, fuck off.
Yeah, but wouldn't it have been great to just see a scene where Tony Stark goes into a bar and we see Jessica Jones, like, on her third G&T or whiskey or whatever, and then just have a scene of Jessica Jones and Tony drinking, and then he convinces her by getting her drunk.
Oh, that would have been so good. She's just stumbling out into the fight. All right, let's do
talking.
this.
You've been ducked, dude.
You're assuming that didn't happen. I mean, there's nothing to say.
Yeah.
There could be a deleted scene and stuff, but there's a whole debate over whether or not the Netflix TV show guys can hold their own against the movie actors. I've read all this crazy crap, and
that actress that played Jessica Jones was everything. Like, she was perfect. Like, I fucking hated Jessica Jones as a character, so she could hold her own against the...
So, I mean, but Spider-Man just in general was just an amazing way to bring him into it. And then his little thing at the ending. Like one thing that I've always hated about the other movies is they never played on his gadgets. They never played on anything. At the ending, he's playing with the Spidey signal, and he's messing with the web shooters. And he's just webbing things up, like webbing people down. And it's just everything about it was amazing.
Man, Homecoming's going to be so sweet. And again, Spider-Man had an amazing part to play in this movie, and yet he didn't devour the whole movie, and it didn't become about him. He played his part, then he gracefully stepped out on a high note.
Oh, yes. It was literally like Marvel saying, hey, guys, like, yes, we have Spider-Man, and here's what he'll look like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Done. That was it. That was all we needed.
I mean, it wasn't even like the Black Panther thing where they were setting up the movie. I loved like he got thrown aside, and Tony's like, sit this one out. You're out. You're out. I'll tell your aunt. I'll tell your aunt. I'll tell
Oh, yeah. Treating
Well, that I also said, like, as soon as I saw someone knew who Spider-Man was, I was like, oh, Tony's gonna die in an upcoming movie. Fuck. Like, because they have to keep that no one knows who Spider-Man is. They have to keep that. They will. And so it's just kind of like
making
confirmed.
friends who know. I mean, he's got some people who know who he is. Even after One More Day, he was like, you, and you. I'm going to tell it again.
You get to be in the special club. Like, you get to be in the special Spidey club.
At that age, though, he wasn't like that at that age.
Oh, they got to tweak him around. And if you're not following the comics right now, they are retconning a lot of his origin to line up with what they want.
Yes, they are.
The Spidey comics, like, I love and hate them at the same time because I hate the fact that they're retconning everything, but I'm like, kind of like the portrayal of Peter Parker as like fun-loving, nerdy kid.
It's fun if frustrating at times. That's how I would describe Spidey. But I also remember, too, you know what? It's not for guys like us who have been reading forever. It's for the new generation who is picking up Spider-Man for the first time.
Yeah.
So, before I let you guys ramble and rant and rave, let's go ahead and end the recorded version of this podcast, okay? So we're going to do a quick little end bumper, guys, say who we all are, and then we will continue to chat, ramble, and rant until everyone has to go, because we are past our normal end time, but I get a feeling there's a lot more people want to say about this topic. So if you are watching this on the other channels, then don't forget we do stream this every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. We go live, talk about the latest pop culture, comic books, movies, whatever is currently tickling our fancy. We also go live on Thursdays with another podcast talking more directly about comic books. Every Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday, and after these podcasts, typically, although today I get a feeling this is going to go on too long, we do play video games on here. Sometimes it's just me, sometimes it's my wife, sometimes it's the entire weekly poll. So if you do enjoy this podcast and you do enjoy us streaming, don't forget you can always give us a follow. We really do appreciate that. And subscriptions are our bread and butter. It's what keeps this podcast moving forward. It allows us to keep it ad-free to an extent, and it allows us to do everything you guys want us to do, which is multiple shows per week. So don't forget, we do appreciate that. I don't think there's much else to say. For those who are watching this on Sal's channel or on Comic TV, I'm Benny the Comic Historian. That is Joel from Caped Joel. That is Rob from Comics Explained. And that is Faust from It's Super Effective. Our Twitter handles are quite simple. Oh, wow. Our Twitter handles are quite simple. At Comic Historian, at Comics Explained, at the DVD Grouch, and at Rhythm Beats Music. Don't ask why they don't know how to brand themselves. It just is the case.
I know how to brand myself. I just don't want to go through all my videos and change it to It's Super Effective.
All right, so we're going to stop the post-recording, guys. Thank you so much for watching this. Let us know in the comments down below what your opinions on the movie are. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Are you guys going to call me a big idiot again like you did with Batman v Superman? Like, whatever you guys want to say.
It is the internet, so the chances are yes, this will happen.
No, I remember that, yeah. So that's the end of that, and local.